looked at your life and wondered, how did I get here? Not just the rock bottom moment, I mean the slow unraveling, the quiet chaos, the patterns you couldn't see until they were screaming at you. I used to think my story started the day I got sober, but it didn't. It started long before that, when I was still numbing, still surviving, still pretending I was fine. Today, I want to take you back, not to the end, but to the beginning. And I want to show you how the chapter called How It Works from the Big Book helped me understand my story, my fears, my faults, and my fight to heal. Now, the spiral. When life feels like it's spinning out of control, how often do we reach out for something to numb the chaos, but only to find ourselves deeper in it? I've told you about my first drink in a previous episode, but today I want to tell you about the time in between my first drink and my last, because that's where my real story lives. It's not just about alcohol, it's about the secrets I carried, pain I didn't know how to face, the chaos I created, the moment I finally realized I had a choice: die or get help. When I was in junior high, something happened that I carried as a secret for years. I was 13 at the beach with family and friends. We were hanging out with a lot older boys, and I thought it was harmless fun. But then in a blur, something happened I wasn't ready for. Something I didn't want. I remembered going back to my room, crying myself to sleep, and never speaking of it again. I felt like I had failed, like I had lost the one pure thing I had. And it planted this deep lie inside me that it was my fault, that I was ruined, and that I didn't deserve better. A few months later, I had a boyfriend. His mom overheard us on the phone talking about having sex for the first time, and she told my mom. That night, my mom whooped my butt for the first time. My dad cried in front of me for the first time. I watched his heart break, and I felt like I had broken him. From then on, I believed I was damaged, used goods, and if that were true, why care about what happened to me anymore? That's when I kind of started partying. Going into high school, drinking felt like freedom. It quieted the knot in my stomach. It calmed my nerves. It made me feel relaxed. For the first time in years, I felt free. The way I did as a little kid riding jet skis with my dad or playing in the woods. Alcohol became my best friend. After football games, at parties, everyone was drinking. And no one thought twice about it, except for my mom. She saw the danger. She didn't want me to end up like my dad or her dad, an alcoholic. But nothing she could have done would have stopped me. I was already hooked. And honestly, I believe this is what my journey always was meant to be. It was to include alcoholism because I was meant to experience this so that I can one day help others. Now, back to high school. It was full of drama. Fights with friends, fights with boys, fights after football games, big ones the whole school went to. Then Hurricane Katrina hit. My mom didn't want to stay in all that chaos, so we moved to North Carolina. But I didn't fit in. The school was harder, the kids were different, the teachers treated me like I didn't belong. I spent so many days crying in the basement bathroom, feeling completely alone. Eventually, I moved back to Louisiana for a while. My dad, of course, was still drinking, but he wrecked his van in a ditch. By 16, I had no choice but to go back to North Carolina for good. That's when I met my daughter's father. By January of my junior year, I was pregnant. After I had my daughter, her dad and I broke up. I was hurt, angry, jealous, watching him live life like nothing had changed, while I felt like I was raising our baby. I told myself, if he gets to live free, why can't I? That became my excuse for years. I'd have my mom babysit so I could go party. Partying felt like freedom. Alcohol gave me courage to dance, to forget, to escape. It made me feel invincible, even when it made me reckless. And every time I hurt someone or hurt myself, I found a way to justify it. And if I felt guilty, I drank until I didn't. My first long relationship after my daughter's father lasted about 5 years. And that's when I stepped into a world I didn't know before, the world of abuse. He put his hands on me and I let it happen. I justified it by fighting back. My daddy always said, don't start the fight, but if someone swings or hits you, you better finish it. So that's how I've always lived. But the truth is, it wasn't a fair fight. It was abuse. He cheated, lied, and tore my self esteem into pieces. I carried that pain into the next relationship, and things got just as toxic. Fights escalated, keys were hidden, glass shattered, windows broken. By me, my rage exploded out of me. And it wasn't just about boyfriends anymore. That rage came anytime I felt wronged. It was F around and find out. And I was just waiting to jump on anyone who crossed that line, regardless of their reasoning. It was the kind of anger that grows from negative thinking, the kind that tricks you into believing you're better than everyone else. Like life is a competition with every other girl out there, where your insecurities scream so loud that when someone even slightly reminds you of them, you lash out. I remember thinking that anger would never go away. Nothing worked. I swore there had to be an anger pill out there for me. I even went to mood therapy. Nothing worked until I was able to have my next drink. Alcohol helped numb it. But even while drinking, let someone cross me or one of my friends, alcohol didn't just loosen me, it fueled the chaos. And turn up Tara was on the loose. If you got in the way of my fun, I'd find a way to blame you or say that you were jealous. That's how I felt. I began to lie all the time to cover up my drinking from my mom or anyone that would question it. Or I'd fight my way out the door and straight to my next drink if they try to stop me. I wasn't just chasing the buzz. I felt like I was only living when I was drinking. Before I got sober, I never understood how some of my friends could be happy at home just watching Netflix. Like, how could they be so content on a Friday night? It made no sense. For me, drinking, it was the only way I knew how to feel happy, the only way I knew how to have fun and to be myself. Everything else felt dull, heavy, or fake. Drinking became the only thing that made me feel alive, even when it stopped working. Even when the buzz didn't hit the same, my alcoholic mind kept whispering, it'll be better next time. You just need one more. And I did believe it over and over again until the bottom wasn't just a moment, it was a way of life. Have you ever looked around and realized the choices you've been making aren't just hurting you? They could take everything you love away. It was the summer of 2018, the summer I got sober. I was on a beach trip with my dad, and we wanted to stay a little longer, so we had to switch hotels. It was a morning after we had drank the night before. I had a breathalyzer installed in my car from a DUI I had gotten, and when it wouldn't start, I panicked. That's when my dad and I came up with a plan. He didn't just see it happen, he helped me figure it out. We decided I'd ask my daughter to blow into the breathalyzer so the car would start. So she did. And in that moment, I told myself it was okay because he said it was, because he approved, because if my dad, the man I looked up to, thought it was fine, then maybe it wasn't that bad. We weren't drinking after all, but it was. I didn't just do it once, I repeated it. Later, back in our neighborhood, I asked her to do it again. She would ride her bike. I just needed her to blow so I could drive myself to the pool. So I had my case of beer. But the truth is, I taught my daughter to help me cover my addiction. When her dad found out, he told my mom. My mom showed up at my house, poured all my liquor and drinks out, and told me I could lose my daughter. She was freaking out. I thought they were all crazy and that they were all against me. But when I realized I could actually get in trouble, that I could lose custody of the one person who mattered to me the most, I broke. That day, I wanted to die. I truly believed my daughter would be better off without me. I felt worthless, betrayed, exhausted. I didn't want to fight anymore. Not with the people, not with life, not with myself. It felt like the game of life had hit game over, and I was just done. And deep down, I knew my life had just become unmanageable. So I was left with two choices: to die or to seek help. What would it feel like to walk into a room full of strangers, unsure if anyone could understand your pain, yet knowing this is your only option? Well, I did choose to seek help that day. As you can see, I'm sitting here. I spent weeks calling treatment centers, figuring out FMLAs for work, scrambling to pay bills, and begging for a chance to turn things around. On July 31st, 2018, I walked into Cornerstone Recovery in Knoxville, Tennessee. That was the day I began my path to recovery. During my first week there, I called to check in with my mom. The first thing she asked was, "Have you talked to your brother?" Which was strange because that's not even her son. I was like, "No." She said for me to call him right away. So I did. And that's when I found out my dad, my best friend, the man I talked to every single day before I checked into treatment, was in the hospital and on a ventilator and not expected to make it through the next 24 hours. I was hysterical. I was ready to leave treatment, pack up, and then straight back to Louisiana. Nothing was going to stop me from getting to my dad. Forget recovery, forget everything, forget everyone. But somehow my brother convinced me to stay. I don't even know how he did it to this day, but I did. I stayed. And I held on to the belief that it was what my daddy would have wanted. A day later, I called my brother to check in again, and my dad somehow had come out of a coma. He was off the ventilator, but he couldn't remember anyone. My brother was in the room, and my dad didn't even recognize him. He didn't recognize anyone in our family. But the first thing he said and remembered was, "Is Tara still in rehab?" That's what he called it, rehab. You'll hear me refer to it as treatment, but that moment, that was God. Even though I wasn't exactly on speaking terms with God back then, I knew He had to have a hand in that. My dad also fought through the pain. I know it. I truly believe he couldn't let go, knowing what that would have done to me while I was in treatment. They gave him 6 months to live. Well, I graduated the 30-day inpatient program. I listened to the stories. I learned about addiction. I learned about AA meetings, sponsors. I learned how to get sober and stay sober. They suggested I continue with the 6 week IOP, intensive outpatient program, 3 days a week, 4 hours a day. So I did. While I was doing that, I was planning a trip to see my dad for the last time. His birthday was October 20th. Back then it was September, so I thought I had a little time when I was planning. But I had been out of work for over a month. Bills were piling up from treatment, living expenses. I didn't have any PTO left. I figured I'd fly down for his birthday, knowing I'd need time off when he passed. But as I packed in mid-October and was getting ready to fly in a few days before his birthday, he passed away. 4 days to be exact, October 16th, 2018. It was devastating, but somehow I still got through it sober. After that, I didn't go back to AA for 6 months. I knew if I did, I'd break down, I'd cry, I'd have to face emotions of losing my dad, and I still struggle with showing emotion to this day. There was no way I wanted to feel that pain again. No way I wanted to relive it. Even though deep down, I knew going back would have helped. Until one day, I was in my kitchen. My mom was there, maybe staying with me. I can't remember exactly, but we've been bickering like we used to. And out of nowhere, she looked at me and said, "Have you been drinking? Are you on drugs?" I was stunned, livid. Like, what the hell was she thinking? I'd worked my butt off to get sober, and I ain't touched any even bit of a drink. And she was throwing that accusation at me like I hadn't changed at all. Ooh, that resentment hit deep. And that's when I realized I needed a meeting. Not because I was drinking, but because I wasn't doing the work. I remembered what they said in treatment. Recovery isn't just about removing the alcohol. It's about doing the steps, getting a sponsor, showing up, and helping others. All I had done was remove the drink. I thought that was enough. The real problem was deeper. The irritability, the discontent, the restlessness. One of the hardest and most emotional thoughts I had was believing I'd never have fun again. No more watching football or going to baseball games. No more pool days or beach days. No more boat days. No weddings. No dancing. Because in my mind, alcohol was the key to it all. It was the only life I knew. It was the only normal I'd ever lived. I couldn't grasp that it was possible to have fun and live without alcohol. It felt more out of reach than anything I'd ever imagined. Like someone telling me men are from Mars, like I'm to believe that. That's how foreign it felt. But I remember finally making it to that next meeting after that fight with my mom. I remember hearing a young person speak, and for the first time in a long time, I saw hope. I really related to his story. He was like me, and he did it. That meant it was possible. That feeling of wishing and believing in something again, it was like being a little girl at Disney World, believing in fairy tales. But this wasn't a fairy tale. This was real life. And they said if I followed the suggestions, if I lived by the simple principles laid out in the big book, I could know the same freedom. And I had to find out where that freedom came from, but it was by working with someone who had already walked the path. That feeling of hope, of believing again, it lit something in me. And that's when I knew I had to man up, take the first step that was suggested. I had to ask someone to be my sponsor. Because if I wanted what they had, I had to be willing to do what they did. Have you ever met someone who simply asked you to face the truth? Not to judge you, not to fix you, but to finally allow you to see yourself honestly? Well, that's what came with my sponsor. After I finally grew the courage to ask someone to be my sponsor, she said yes. And to this day, I truly believe that woman saved my life. She held my hand through it all. She listened to everything, every secret I ever buried. And not once did she make me feel less than, unworthy, or broken. She made me feel loved. She made me feel cared about. She would always tell me to ask God to help me become the woman He has always intended me to be because she saw my worth even when I couldn't. At the time, my mindset was still scattered. I wanted the pain gone, but I didn't want to do all the work. But my sponsor, she didn't try to fix me. She didn't judge me. She just guided me through the big book using her experience, strength, and hope, which helped me to find the courage to write all of mine down. And that's when the healing began. Putting pen to paper, seeing the truth of my life in black and white. It wasn't about someone saving me. It was about being willing to take the next step, which meant I had to be willing to be honest with myself and with another human being. I had to begin my inventory. I started with fear, fear of being abusive, fear of never loving myself, fear of letting anyone love me, fear of loving and then being abused, cheated on, treated like dirt, fear of being mean to the ones I love, fear of intimacy, losing someone, rejection, relapse, failure, being a bad mom, fear of being criticized, embarrassed, lied to, or forgotten. I had to write it all down. I also had to write every name, every wound, every resentment, like my daughter and her father, her stepmom, my mom, my dad, other family members, friends, coworkers, my exes, the girl who cut my face with a beer glass, the lawyer who I felt stole my money, the bail bondsman who maced me, the cheer coaches and other cheerleaders who bullied me, and a select few of my friends who got caught in the crossfire. Some strippers who jumped me in the parking lot of a strip club. Don't worry, I came out like a G regardless. The kids who made fun of me growing up for the gap between my front teeth. The crazy drivers on the road, people I didn't even know, but who still managed to piss me off. The older boy who took advantage of me, the girls my exes cheated on me with, the friends who stayed silent when I needed them to speak up, the IRS, the DMV, and the TSA, systems that felt like they were built to break you down, not to lift you up, and Disney for selling us this fairy tale, the happily ever after lie, when real life doesn't come with a magic wand. Anyone who offended me, who made me feel small, who stirred up resentment in my heart, they all made the list. They had to. I listed what they did, how it made me feel, what it affected my self esteem, my pride, my security, my relationships. And then I asked the hardest question: what was my part? I saw how fear shaped my reactions, how selfishness and dishonesty crept in, how I tried to control everything to avoid pain, how I stayed silent or lashed out or shut down. But I also saw something else. I saw the truth that I was trying, that I was healing, and that I was finally willing to face myself and my truth. What would it be like to see your own story through a lens that shows you why things went wrong and gives you the map to help you change them? And that brings me here to the chapter in the big book called How It Works. It's more than words on a page. It's a map, a mirror, a reminder that my story is not unique. That every alcoholic who finds recovery walks this path in some way. So, in part 2 of this episode, I want to walk you through the next chapter of the big book, How It Works. So, here's what the big book says next, and I'm going to break it down how I understand it. It starts with a bold truth. If you follow this path thoroughly, you probably won't fail. But if you can't be honest with yourself, recovery might not work for you. And that's not judgment, it's just reality. Some people struggle with honesty because of how they're wired. Some have deep emotional or mental health challenges. But even then, if you have the capacity to be honest, you can recover. That line hit me hard because I used to lie to myself all the time. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I was in control. I told myself I didn't need help. But deep down, I had been drowning. The book says our stories show what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. That's what I'm doing here, telling you my story. And if you're listening and you want what we have and you're willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready. But here's the warning. You might hesitate. You might think there's an easier, softer way. I did. I tried shortcuts. I tried controlling the process, but the results was nothing until I let go completely. And then comes the reminder: alcohol is cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it's too much. But there is one who has all power, and that one is God. You have to find him now. That's not just poetic, it's urgent, because half measures won't work. You're standing at the turning point. You have to throw yourself into this completely. No holding back, no halfway measures. And then the book lays out the steps, not as rules, but as a spiritual path. These are actions we take to recover. Here they are. One, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Two, came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Three, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Four, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Five, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Six, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Seven, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Eight, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for His knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And number 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all of our affairs. You might say, what an order! I can't go through with it. And that's okay. None of us do this perfectly. We're not saints. Well, I guess technically I am a New Orleans saint, just not the one they're referring to in the book. The point is, we're willing to grow. That's what this is all about: progress, not perfection. And then it gives us 3 truths to hold on to: that we are alcoholic and cannot manage our own lives, that probably no human power can relieve our alcoholism, and that God can and will if He is sought. If you're not convinced of these 3 things, the book says you should go back and reread everything. But if you are convinced, then you're ready for step 3, turning your will and your life over to God. And that's where we're headed next. So let's talk about what happens when we try to run the show ourselves. The big book says we're like actors on a stage, trying to control everything: the lights, the music, the cast, the script. We think if everyone just did what we wanted, life would be perfect. And I lived like that for years. I had this invisible script in my head. I thought if people just followed it, I'd finally feel safe, seen, and loved. But what usually happens, the show doesn't go the way we planned. We get frustrated, we try harder, we become more demanding, or we fake being gracious, hoping people will catch on. But still, the play doesn't suit us. We might admit we're a little at fault, but deep down, we're sure other people were the problem. We get angry, we feel sorry for ourselves, we think life is unfair. And here's the truth: even when we're trying to be kind, we're still self seeking. We're chasing happiness by managing everything around us, and it doesn't work. People feel it. They see us trying to control the scene, and they start to push back. They grab what they can from the show, just like we do. And instead of harmony, we create confusion, even in our best moments. That was me. I thought if I just worked harder, planned better, controlled more, if people would just listen and do what I say, I could fix everything. But I was wrong. The big book says our actor is self centered and egocentric. And it gives us examples. The retired businessman complaining about the world, the preacher sighing over society's sins, the politician who thinks everything would be fine if people just behaved, the criminal who blames society, the alcoholic who lost everything and still thinks he's the victim. And I saw myself in all of them. I complained about how unfair it was to be judged for a DUI, especially by people who had already had two of their own. I sighed over how broken everything felt, how no one understood me. I thought if my daughter just saw things the way I did, if she didn't take someone else's side, I'd be okay. I blamed my pain on everyone else, on the people who didn't correct her when she called someone else mom. I stayed silent at work while others slacked off, and then I resented them for it. I stayed in relationships that hurt me, thinking love meant endurance. I was the actor, I was the director, I was the critic, and I was exhausted. The big book doesn't sugarcoat it. Selfishness, self centeredness. That, we think, is the root of our troubles. We're driven by fear, self delusion, self seeking, and self pity. We step on people's toes and they push back. Sometimes they hurt us without warning, but if we're honest, we can trace it back to a decision we based on self. So our troubles, they're of our own making. They come from inside us. Alcoholics are the extreme example of self will run riot, even though we usually don't see it. Above everything, we have to be rid of selfishness. We must, or it kills us. Number three, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So now that we've made that decision to turn our will and our lives over to God, the big book says it's time for action, vigorous action. This is where we start cleaning house. And let's be honest, most of us have never done this kind of cleaning before. Not the surface stuff, not the I'm fine kind. I'm talking about the deep, painful, honest kind. Step three was vital, but it doesn't stick unless we follow it with real effort. We have to face and get rid of the things inside us that have been blocking us. Because the truth is, alcohol was a symptom. Now we're getting down to the real stuff, the causes and condition. That's where step four comes in. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. The big book compares it to a business taking inventory. If a business never checks its stock, it goes broke. Inventory is about finding facts, facing truth. It's about identifying what's damaged, what's unsellable, what we need to get rid of without regret. We do the same thing with our lives. We take stock honestly. We have to look at flaws in our makeup that cause our failures. And we start with the biggest one, resentment. The book says resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. It's the root of spiritual sickness. And when we're spiritually sick, we're mentally and physically sick too. But when we heal spiritually, everything else seems to start to straighten out. And how do we deal with resentment? Well, we write it down. We list every person, institution, or principle we are angry at. And then we ask, why am I angry? Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's layered. I was angry when my daughter called her stepmom mom. That one hit hard. I felt erased, like I didn't matter, like I wasn't enough. I felt discarded. And what made it worse, no one else seemed to care. I felt disrespected, spit on, stomped on. I was angry when my daughter took someone else's side. I felt betrayed and invisible. And in most cases, something I valued was threatened. My self esteem, my security, my pride, my relationship. So I had to write it all down. And then I went deeper. For each resentment, I asked, what part of me was affected? Was it my pride, my emotional security, my ambitions, my sense of worth? The big book gives examples, simple and powerful, and I had my own. Then I went back through my life. I didn't skip anything, I didn't sugarcoat. I was thorough, I was honest. And when I finished, I looked at it carefully. At first, I thought the world and its people were just wrong. That's where most of us stop. We stay angry. We stay sore. Sometimes we turn that anger inward and feel remorse. But the more we fight to have our way, the worse it gets. The big book says it plain. Resentment leads to futility and unhappiness. And for alcoholics, it's even more serious. Resentment is fatal. It cuts us off from the sunlight of the spirit. And when that happens, the insanity of alcohol returns. We drink again. And for us, to drink is to die. So if we want to live, we have to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm might be okay for normal people, but for us, they're poison. Now, here's the shift. We turn back to our list, but this time we look at it differently. We start to see the world and its people have power over us, that their wrongdoings, real or imagined, can actually kill us. So, how do we escape? We realize that the people who hurt us are spiritually sick just like us. Even if we don't like their behavior, we ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we'd show a friend with cancer. When someone offends us, we say, "This person is sick. How can I be helpful to them? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done." We don't argue. We don't retaliate. We wouldn't treat a sick person that way. And if we do, we lose our chance at being helpful. We can't be helpful, but God can show us how to take a kind and tolerant view of each person. So now, we've written down our resentments. The big book tells us to go deeper. We take our list again, but this time we stop focusing on what others did to us. We put their wrongs out of our mind and we look at our own mistakes, where we were selfish, where we were dishonest, where we were self seeking or afraid, even in the situations that weren't entirely our fault. I had to disregard the other person and ask where I was to blame. This was my inventory, not theirs. And when I finally saw my faults, I wrote them down. Of course, I didn't see them at first. It was hard to look at your part when you're buried under all that pain. I had to work with my sponsor because facing the truth alone felt impossible. She helped me peel back those layers, helped me see past the hurt and into the patterns I didn't even know I was repeating. I had to see them in black and white. I had to admit them honestly, and I had to be willing to set things straight. The big book points out something huge. The word fear shows up next to almost every resentment. Fear is everywhere. It's described as an evil and corroding thread. It runs through the fabric of our lives. It sets off chains of events that brings us pain we think we don't deserve. But here's the truth. We set the ball rolling. Sometimes we think fear should be treated like stealing because it causes so much damage. So we review our fears thoroughly. We write them down. Even if they're not tied to resentment, we ask, why do I have this fear? And the answer is usually the same because self reliance failed me. Self reliance works up to a point. Some of us had great confidence, but it didn't solve the fear problem. In fact, when it made us cocky, it made things worse. So, what's the better way? We shift into a new basis, trusting and relying on God. We stop depending on our finite selves and start trusting infinite God. We accept that we're here to play the role He assigns. And just to the extent that we do what He believes He wants us to do and humbly rely on Him, He gives us the strength to face life with peace. The big book says faith means courage. All people of faith have courage. They trust their God. And we don't apologize for that. Instead, we let God show what He can do through us. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. And just like that, we begin to outgrow fear. So let's go deeper. When I first read the next part of the big book, I didn't want to touch it. Sex inventory, no thanks. I thought, I'm not the problem, they are. But the truth is, I had patterns, I had pain, and I had to face it. I used sex to feel wanted, to feel numb, to feel like I mattered, even when I didn't believe it. I only had sex drunk because sober sex meant facing the shame I carried. Shame about my body, shame about being told I wasn't beautiful, shame about being cheated on or used or discarded. I didn't trust anybody. I didn't trust love. And when I did love someone, losing them felt like death. It made me feel like I'd never be whole again. I was mean to the people closest to me because I thought they'd never leave. That wasn't love. That was fear dressed up in survival. But when the big book asked me to review my conduct, I had to ask, where was I selfish? Where was I dishonest? Where was I inconsiderate? Who did I hurt? Did I stir up jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? What should I have done instead? And I had answers, hard ones. I had been selfish when I used sex to feel better about myself. I had been dishonest when I pretended it was okay with things that broke me. I had been inconsiderate when I pushed people away before they could leave me. I had stirred up jealousy and suspicion, not always on purpose, but sometimes out of fear. And I hurt people, people I loved, people who loved me. So I wrote it all down, and then I asked God to help shape me a new ideal, one that wasn't built on fear or shame, one that honored my body, my heart, and my healing. I had to believe that intimacy could be safe, that love could be healing, and I had to be willing to grow towards that ideal, to make amends where I'd done harm, to forgive myself, to forgive others, to trust God would guide me. Because this part of my life, like every other part, needed surrender. It needed honesty. It needed grace. So if this part of your story feels messy, you're not alone. Just bring it to God. Ask Him what you should do. The right answer will come if you truly want it. And if you stumble, if you fall short of your ideal, it doesn't mean you're doomed. It just means you're human. If you're sorry and you want to do better, you will. You will grow. You will heal. But if you're not sorry and you keep hurting others, you're in danger because that kind of conduct leads us back to the bottle. And for us, to drink is to die. So pray for the right ideal. Ask for guidance. Ask for sanity. Ask for strength. And if this part of your life is especially troublesome, throw yourself even harder into helping others. Think about their needs. Work for them. That will pull you out of yourself. It will quiet the urge that, if indulged, would lead to heartache. So, that's where my story led me. Through the pain, the chaos, the denial, and finally to the point where I was willing to surrender. And that surrender opened the door to recovery. But that's not the end. It's really just the beginning. Because once I got sober, I had to learn a whole new way to live. That's where the big book came in, and that's why I'm walking through it with you, chapter by chapter, sharing not just the words on the page, but how they played out in my own life. Next week, we'll dive into the next chapter into action. That's where the steps stop being just words and start becoming a way of life. It's where I had to put my honesty, my willingness, and my faith into real action. And I'll be sharing the experience, strength, and hope I found there. So I hope you'll join me again, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. We don't recover alone. We recover together. Until next time, keep taking it one day and one thought at a time. And remember, there is a way out. This is our Muddy Magnolia Rebellion, and you don't have to walk it alone. Until next time.